the Waterbury Selectboard for Monday, October 6, 2025 to order. Thank you everyone for being here and being here at our not normal location here at the Main Street Fire Station, and thank you to the fire department for hosting. Our first item of business on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the agenda as written.
Second.
Motion by Kane, second by Tori to approve the agenda as presented. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Agenda is approved. The next item is public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone who would like to speak to something that is not on the public agenda. So later on, we have a presentation on Stanley Wasson and public discussion. There'll be time for comment, but if there's anything else someone would like to talk about that's not on this agenda, now is your opportunity to do so. We ask that you keep your comments under 5 minutes, and if needed, we can schedule more time at a future select board meeting. Is there anyone who wants to speak on public comment? Anyone online? Okay. Seeing no one on public comment, we'll proceed and jump right into the presentation of Stanley Wasson proposal. And I will turn it over to our municipal manager, Tom Lights, who has a presentation to share.
Make sure I do this right.
I'm also wondering if we have a sign-up sheet circulating for minutes on attendance.
Yes, we do have an attendance sign-up sheet. If you could please make sure that comes to you. Thank you.
Yep, and thanks to Cheryl Casey, our note taker. All right, Tom, screen sharing happening?
Yes.
Thanks.
All right, I'll be relatively quick. I know a lot of people want to make comments. I just want to give some of the more recent history here. I'm not going back a decade plus when there was talk and debate and public votes about Stanley Wasson becoming town hall. I just want to start with 2022, the Housing Task Force was created. That first bullet about ensuring the availability of safety and affordable housing, that actually comes from the Waterbury Town Plan from 2018. But just to note some of the core goals of the Housing Task Force, one of them is to create new housing. A sub-goal is to support mid and large-sized developments and to increase the amount of affordable housing. So the Housing Task Force created in 2022, these were their goals. Some of them date back, in fact, to the town plan, and I suspect long before. Some more recent history about Stanley Wasson. So the state legislature passed the bill in the spring 2023 session to sell the land to the town, not to transfer, which we lobbied for, but to sell. 2023, that process began. It did not complete until 2025, and I can give you a few of the specifics along the way. One of them is that the state had an appraisal. The state essentially insisted that they were not going to transfer the land to us for free, that this was land owned by the entire state of Vermont, and the taxpayers deserve to have their economic value returned. So they had their own appraisal done, which came in at $400,000. We argued that for quite a bit. We wound up having our own appraisal done, which came in a little bit higher, at which point we said 400 grand works just fine. But it wasn't until April of this year that we actually we formally executed an option agreement to buy it. So it's an option, there's no obligation, merely an option to buy for $400,000. Sorry, trying to multitask here.
You can just exit, I think.
And that is where we stand today, with an option to buy for $400,000. Couple more recent things. In 2024, the Select Board, after a long series of public sessions of both the Select Board and a lot of work for years by the Planning Commission, and we've got some members here and former members, I don't know how many years, but many, many years, there was work on updating what they called Phase 1 bylaws, which is all the zoning bylaws south of 89. So that work completed in 2024. Substantially, my words, not their words, but my words, a major part of the update was to encourage more housing and more housing density in what essentially amounts to the old village. As part of that, Stanley Wasson was put in what they call the campus district, which has pretty wide open restrictions for that lot specifically. The lot was also added to the town's design review district, which is, I think, pretty critical going forward because design review is done by the town's development review board, which is an independent body of the select board of the planning commission. And so any development there will come before the DRB, and that's critical because there's been a lot of changes to Act 250. And I'll get to this later, but I am not sure as a non-expert that this project or any housing project on that site would in fact need an Act 250 permit. So I think that change to essentially require, if for nothing else, design to be in front of the DRB is an important thing, and I think gives some additional local control to a project there. Also want to mention that it's in the historic district, so that's a separate review done by the state of Vermont, which I think is fairly rigorous. Then comes our designated downtown. So the designated downtown has been in place for a number of years. In October of last year, this parcel was added to our designated downtown, and that allows for a couple of things, but a big one is that if you're in a designated downtown and you're developing housing and you have municipal water and sewer, and those boxes are checked, you are likely exempt from an Act 250 permit. I say likely because, again, I'm not the expert. And the laws have changed in the past 2 years. They've changed pretty significantly. But the designated downtown was modified specifically to include this parcel to help enable some development there. Bringing us to this year, so a couple months ago, we put out a request for qualifications, not a request for proposal. There were 2 public meetings where that was reviewed by the select board. So the difference is, a request for proposal is very formal. A request for qualifications is a bit more informal, and we're essentially saying to a developer, this is the land, this is what we are generally desirous of. Give us your qualifications and give us your sketch plans at this point based on the knowledge we have today as to what you believe you can reasonably put forth on this site. And this was a real challenge, and I was actually very concerned that no one would respond, because if you look at the history of these sort of projects in Vermont, there's 2 trends you see. The first is so often the lots are sold for $1. And the second is, beyond that, there's oftentimes a really large public subsidy. And so in our request for qualifications, we said that we are paying $400,000 for the site, and we would like to see that investment recovered by the taxpayers. And so that was a critical difference. We didn't lead with a big subsidy, which some municipalities do in Vermont. And I can tell you, I talked to a number of folks in the development world who suggested we get no responses without that. And so from that perspective, I'm pleased we did, and that we have I think, a really credible response. Second part of this is that we did have what's called a Phase 1 environmental assessment. And what that is it's a review of all the documentation available that an engineer can find, and based on documentation, they make a determination as to whether or not more stringent review is necessary. And that's actually on the website. You can look at it. It's about a 300-page document because they include as attachments every little bit of information they found back to when the buildings existed. And the critical phrase that they put in their report is no identification of past conditions automatically warrant further review. So what that means is not that there won't be further environmental review, because there will be, but it means they did not identify anything obvious that would suggest that we've got a dirty site here that we've got to worry about. So that's, at this stage, the best you can hope for, but like I said, additional testing. Moving on, so there's parts of the proposal I cannot talk about yet. We have an attorney named David Rue with, it's called SPNF Attorneys, and I forget the acronym. It used to be Stitzel, Page and Fletcher, but Dave Rue is really a land use specialist, and I gave him this proposal, and he knew the intent was to make every bit of this public. And I got message back from him Friday about what is public and what is not, and I also met with the developer on Friday to talk about this. And I told the developer that the intent is to make as much of this public. And so what can be public at this time is on the website now. I put it up about 3 hours ago. So I just want to say, before I get into this, what's not public. What's not public are three things at this point. One, the developer did provide to us sketch drawings, and the developer did provide to us some estimates of the number of units, as in 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms, and estimates of, and actually floor plans. That's not public. Under public records, that's essentially considered a trade secret at this point. And the other part I want to emphasize, and this is critical, if that was public, these are sketch drawings for an RFQ. They are not the final product. They are going to change a number of times between now and whatever process happens next. So I know that's what people want to see, but that's not something I can share with you right now. Do want to say fairly large site, about 2.4 acres, and there were multiple buildings designs proposed for us to think about. And essentially the next step with the developer, should there be a next step, and that's not my decision, that's a select board's decision, and there does not have to be one. The select board can say, we're stopping, we're going back to the drawing board. There's no obligation to move further. But the next step, which a developer has requested, which I think is eminently reasonable, it makes perfect sense. The developer is requested to sign a contract with the town that would give them an exclusivity period. So what that means is, if the developer moves further and evaluates this investment, they've got to pay for a market study, and that's not something they can do, because that's something any bank would require a third party do. Because if you think about 90 units in today's day and age, that's a $50 million investment. So no bank, no matter how sophisticated and big you are, is going to trust your numbers. They're also going to want to do some site testing, soil sampling, some geoengineering work, and they're also going to want to do some more detailed planning on things like architecture and engineering and permitting. And no developer will make that investment unless they can guarantee that at this stage they are not competing with someone else. So again, I think that's reasonable on the part of the developer. That's something I expected on their part. So again, our future process, as there is one, is that the next step would be for the town to directly engage with the developer to try to lay out that time period and enter into that contract, which would say, this is the exclusivity period, these are the issues that will be studied, and this is our role. Another part I want to emphasize is that, and I'll get to a little more in detail, but there's some grant opportunities here that are likely of great mutual benefit for the town and the developer. So a couple of timelines. I know everyone wants to know timelines, and the first thing I'm going to say, and I'll say this many times, and if you call me tomorrow, I'll tell you this 5 times over, I don't know. This is really, really rare for a town to be in a position to work directly with the developer on a 90-unit proposal. It's really rare to be in this position. You just doesn't happen very often, and so there is just no exact roadmap for us. And so I say to all of you, just like you, we have more questions than answers at this point, and you're all going to have to bear with us as we work through this in a public process, which is always messy. It's especially messy when there's not a clear roadmap. This is not a typical public hearing where we're writing a grant application or we're passing a budget. This is something really unusual. And thus far, we have done this without consultant help, and we might need some of that. We might engage in this process to determine that we need to bring in a few experts to get from point A to point B, and to make sure that we're negotiating, we're asking the right questions, we're being reasonable on our part, but we're trying to get into this proposal some of the community desires to the extent we can. And I think for all of us, and especially people at these front tables, this will be a real challenge, again, because it's not something we've done before. It's a really rare thing to be in this position. I want to talk a little bit about fiscal impact, and obviously nothing is being built tomorrow, nothing happens overnight. This is significant. But if I use $250,000 per unit, and everyone will say, well, that's really low in today's day and age, but bear in mind, this is our grand list where everything is undervalued dramatically. So $250,000 is similar to what the units are valued at that were on High Street, the 9-unit building. So I think it's reasonable. If there's an affordable housing component, would it be a bit less? Yes. If there's a market rate component, would it be higher? Sure. But I think $250,000 is a reasonable place to start. So using current tax rates, you're getting a pretty significant bump in both town and education taxes here. That 1.5% on the grand list. If everything else was equal, you got 120 grand more in revenue, your tax rate is $1.50 lower for the town. School is different grand list, crosses multiple towns, but that's just the Waterbury portion. Waterbury sends about $16 million, a little over $16 million to the school district. So this is based on that number. It's not based on the district-wide, but just the portion Waterbury property owners send. So I think that's pretty meaningful. Waterbury's grand list grows on average 1% a year, and that's the average for the past decade. And actually not a huge amount of variation in that average. It's a pretty steady number we can count on. So 1.5% is a year and a half of growth as a one-shot. Again, this all assumes at full build, at full value. The other piece I want to talk about, this is a town meeting, I just want to make a quick EFUD note for the wonderful people here who are on Municipal Water and Sewer. New connections to EFUD pay what's called an allocation fee, and what that really is, it's a base charge, and it's essentially saying that EFUD is permanently allocating this much capacity to make water and to treat water for you. So that allocation fee, it's a separate one for water and a separate one for sewer because they are separate customers in some cases. So the fee for water and sewer would be $100,000 for each, so meaning over $200,000 in total for EFUD. And I don't want to give an exact number because sometimes there's a little variation and a little bit debate in how that's calculated. But again, that would be at full build. That's a one-time fee payment. There are substantial ongoing base charges and usage charges that would go with that. But I just want to say that because water and sewer utilities, they run on economies of scale. So the more customers we can get at this point, the better off everyone is. And there's a lot of capacity to send more potable water and to treat the wastewater from this site. So that utility would really benefit, and all the customers would benefit from this. I want to talk about what's called the CHIP program just a little bit, and a little bit of the speculative. So CHIP, I'm not going to say the acronym, but what CHIP is a state financing program that would allow for a municipality or even actually a developer, because the law has just changed this year, to keep the property tax revenue and invest it in public improvements on the site or potentially directly related to the site. And I say potentially because the bill has passed, but the state is still working on the rules and that they won't be finalized until January, and I hope they'll be finalized in January. But the short version of what that means is, depending on what the use of the funds is, 75 to 85% of those funds can be retained potentially by the town and used for other site improvements. And so the best example and the most clear example under that program is affordable housing. So tax revenue from this site, including the education revenue, could essentially be transferred in some way, shape, or form to be determined to help incentivize self-leverage and affordable housing component to this project. And potentially there's a lot of revenue there. The second part, and this is really clear as mud to me, but Randall Meadow is next door. So the CHIP program is really site-specific, so I can't tell you if those potential funds can be applied to pay for Randall Meadow. It's really unclear to me, but it may be possible. And so again, very, very unclear, but it may be possible. But what is not unclear is it is likely that if there's public improvements on the site, and two obvious ones are affordable, one obvious one is affordable housing, a second one that we put in the RFQ is a public park. Potentially new tax revenues from that site, instead of going directly to the town or the school or the state education funds coffers, could be used to pay for those public improvements. And so there's potentially a financing program there that that could be to some public benefit. You're probably wondering about the CHIP program and how we would enroll in that, and the answer is the rules aren't published yet, but I'm certain it's going to be a series of public meetings, and it's likely to be public votes. So that's all fairly speculative at this point, but it is a program that was a major part of the last legislative session, so I wanted to note that because I'm actively thinking about it, and I'm following those meetings to make sure I understand the program, so that if there's a desire to pull the pin on January 1, I'd like to be personally ready. And I did want to just talk a little bit for a second just about Randall Meadow next door. So we've got 2 grant applications in to do that project, hopefully in full. One of those grant applications is a federal grant. It's FEMA money. Federal government is shut down, as we all know. And even if it's not, I can tell everyone in this room that if we are awarded a FEMA grant today, I still have an awful lot of heartache and heartburn to go with that. I'm not sure I really trust a grant from the federal government until the cash is in my hand. And I don't say that to be cynical. I think that's a reasonable statement of fact to say in this moment in time. And every grant is reimbursement based. You spend the money first. And so that all worries me a great deal, and beyond worry, just flat out scares me. And so if there is any way to tie this project financially to do the Randall Meadow project, I'm going to work hard to try to figure that out, because I think that's worthy of some effort, and that's worthy of some creativity, if it's possible. So that's my short presentation. Happy to answer any questions. I know I moved quick, but I thought I wanted to leave a lot of time for comment.
Thanks, Tom. In terms of process, I want to see upfront if select board members have questions or comments, and then turn it over to the public. I'll start with the first question, Tom, which is, can you reiterate where on our municipal website all of this information can be found, recognizing that people are likely hearing this for the first time tonight. If the screen share is still happening, it might be there. So if folks come to our select board meetings regularly, under boards and meetings and select board, we often post materials there. As Tom is demonstrating, this item is the top item under news and initiatives. I think you got it. Yeah. So just to reiterate that's where this information is. People can go home, dig into it more, follow up with information.
It'll stay at the top of news, or will it continue to move down
Oh, great question.
as it becomes less news?
I'm at under news and initiatives, which is this tab here on the top. The alerts at the top, I think, do change as more relevant things are updated, but I just meant top under this news and initiatives drop down. Other select board members with questions before we dive in? All right, seeing none and seeing a healthy amount in the room, and I think we have about 15 online. If amenable to the board, I was gonna go with like 3 minutes, questions or comment per person to try and get as many people in, and if we get through everyone and have more time, we can use it. We're scheduled till 8:30. I am very sorry that we have this rather unfortunate hot seat environment. It's really for the Zoom owl, which is recording online, so I will ask that folks make their way up to the hot seat one by one and just say your name. I think the select board can introduce ourselves because we didn't do that, and we should all be on a level playing field. So I'm Alyssa Johnson. I live on South Main Street. I'm currently the chair of the Waterbury Select Board.
I'm Tori Taravella. I live in the center.
I'm Kane Sweeney. I live on Guptill, Vice Chair of the Select Board.
Roger Clapp, 4 Randall Street.
Mike Ford, I live on Mansion Hollow.
And Tom Lights, as I said, our municipal manager. I will also alternate between both in the room and online. So maybe if you want to stop the share, but kind of try and do a couple in the room and then a couple online just for ease. So anyone in the room with a raise of hand wants to ask a question or comment first, I'm going to turn my phone on noise and time it to 3 minutes just in transparency for everyone here. So you all came out on a Monday night, and we're really excited, but no questions. Go here first. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Pete Martell. I live on Park Row, actually right next to the site. So can we all admit that this is in the special hazard flood zone? So it floods? We all know that, right? I just want to be sure. Yeah. And so as a select board, I'm asking you guys, because you are responsible for the well-being of our town, our property, the citizens, that you take that responsibility to heart before you approve projects that might put these property, the neighborhood, in danger of additional flooding. Because I think that's one of the fears that we have, is that any disruption to this area will cause greater harm in the future at the bottom of Randall Street or halfway down or over on Main Street. So really think about that before you decide to create a situation that creates more harm to the whole neighborhood. I mean, I understand we need housing, don't get me wrong, but in the flood zone, I think might be, not the best place. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
If I may real quick, I just want to respond to that. I think it's a great comment. So at one point in the presentation, I mentioned that we were likely to hire, or I would probably recommend hiring some consultants to assist us with this. I'm not just thinking about where the benches might go or where the trees might be planted. The developer has hired Grenier Engineering as a local presence. We work with Grenier a lot, and I have a lot of faith in John Grenier, and I've worked with him personally, but our consultant team could be our own engineer to answer exactly those questions and try to make sure that we are appropriately protecting the neighborhood. So I think it's a great question, and I think it's something that we'll all take to heart. So when I say consultants, I don't just mean, we want to have another layer of brick, or we want it green instead of red. I mean questions like that.
There was another hand in the back. Yeah, come on up.
Good evening. I'm Brian Kravitz at 17 Randall. I have faith that the select board is gonna make sure that it's not gonna, we need this housing. Clearly, financially, the long-term payoff, even 400,000 plus consultants with all those tax dollars, 4-year payoff for that. Then from there, it's just more money, right, for the town that we need. I do have faith that you're going to make sure that it's not going to do any more harm. My question is the timing of it. Until the study is done on Randall Meadow, and is that study going to include that parcel of land? Is it prudent to start a project before that information comes in?
That's a great question. I think to some extent that depends on the developer, because it's their building, it's their risk. The intent, we've talked about this for several years, and what I've always said to the select board is, I think our intent should be that once and if we have a final agreement with the developer, that we are not going to own the land. We would own the land for a minute if we can, or a day, and transfer it. And so that would really be on the developer whether or not they would want to assume that risk. As Peter said earlier, it's really incumbent upon the town's leadership team to make sure that nothing there makes things worse for anyone else. Hopefully makes it better.
So that's why, that's my question is, obviously they own the land and the risk would be immediate risk to their property. However, displacement, there's water displacement. Wherever you put something, water is going to go somewhere else. As you mentioned, is that going to move to, the south end of Randall Street, which hasn't flooded in the last 2 floods, whereas the north end did? That's a big concern. Is it going to move, and how does the town stay on top of that? Because just to say, well, it's a great idea, and the developer, it's up to the developer, then what?
Understand. Yep, great question. And I guess what I would also say is that
Can you speak up just a little bit? Hard to hear you
Yep,
back
sorry.
there.
And I guess what I'll also say is that, the timing of this is uncertain, as is the timing of Randall Meadow. It's really hard to give a timeline for either project right now. For this one, we've got to go through a long process with the developer to get to a finish line. For Randall Meadow, the first step is to get answers on the grants, and if those don't happen, we might be in front of the voters asking you for some authority to bond. So the timeline of all these is a bit uncertain. And as I said earlier, for this particular project, I'm not the expert on permitting. And so I just don't know. What I've learned about Randall Meadow permitting is that if we had the cash in hand for that project today, I think we're at least 18 months of permitting and design to get to an actual construction phase. That's if we had all the cash in hand today.
Fair enough, thank you.
Magic. Thank you. Yep, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Bill Shepeluk, and I want to thank the Select Board and Tom for all the work that you've done to date on this. And the only comment that I'll have right now is that I think in many ways, this project, we are very fortunate that right now there's some contemplation that the town will be involved in the development of this project. The state has voted through the legislature to sell the property, or at least enter into an option with the town to sell the property. Kind of means the state doesn't need the property anymore. And whether it's $400,000 or $1 million, some developer will probably buy it at some point if the state wants to divest itself from it. In all the other scenarios that we are looking at, the town's only role would be regulatory through its zoning and planning departments. The issues with regard to flooding are addressed in the zoning bylaws. You're not allowed to develop if you're going to displace water over a certain amount that would go somewhere else. So there's a lot of questions right now as to where this project might go. But I think if there's going to be a project there, having the town in the seat right beside the developer, helping to ensure these, that there are answers to these legitimate questions that are being asked, I think that's the best place that the town could be. So for me, if this is going to be developed, we need the housing. EFUD definitely can use 90 more customers on its water and sewer system. The tax revenues that come along with it, all that is gravy on top of getting 90 units of housing if that's what really comes to fruition. But I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that having the town at the table as the developer is really the best way that we can be protected. So if people are out there saying, well, the town shouldn't be involved in this, I think the default might be that, well, somebody else will be involved and the town is going to have a lot less say except in regulatory issues. Thank you.
Thanks. I see one in the room. We'll do that, and then I'm going to switch to online. Go ahead.
Hi, Dana Allen. I'm wearing two hats tonight. Vice Chair of the Planning Commission and also consultant with the town doing flood resilient grant management. Is that what we decided I was doing?
Something like that, yeah.
Project stuff with respect to flood. So to speak to sort of like some of the regulatory issues, yes, this is in the special flood hazard overlay area. That is very clear. There are regulations around that. We all recognize that. The other thing that we just wrapped up, as Tom kind of said, is the Phase 1 bylaws. We did make substantial changes to the bylaws during that time. However, we also greatly expanded the design review overlay district, which gives the DRB additional oversight of developments within the Phase 1 area. And that was done very intentionally because we recognize the scale of these changes. We did do a lot of things that will change development in the Phase 1 area. And as a sort of a backstop to that, we wanted to make sure that there was some level of additional scrutiny. So the DROD, as it's called, is inclusive of this area. So that was very intentional. Switching hats. Flood resilience grant management, consulting hat. I've worked in stormwater management and water quality for the past decade and a half or so in Vermont. We're pursuing not only the Randall Meadow project, which we've all sort of heard about sort of ad nauseum at this point, or maybe we're just hearing about it for the first time. It's a big project. It's a meaningful project, a foot of flood reduction over most of the downtown area in a 50-year storm, 7,000 feet upstream, so essentially to the Route 2 bridge, like over by Bicycle Express in that area. So that's meaningful, but that's not where we're stopping with this, because we recognize that if we want to continue to have a meaningful downtown area with infrastructure, housing, business, economic vitality, etc., Randall Meadow will help. There are other things that will help. So we're concurrently pursuing a lot of different projects, the Stormwater Master Plan project. We've started putting together an additional grant request for funding for design and implement, or design primarily of 5 different projects and outreach to several others. So I think that it's good to keep in mind that yes, we're proposing, this development is being proposed in light of the recognition that we need additional housing. And also we're doing things that regulatorily make sure that it has less adverse impact or no adverse impact whatsoever if possible, and we're trying to do flood resilience work that mitigates the effects of future floods, because we're going to see them, so the only thing we can do is make them less bad. And I'm personally and professionally committed to doing as much as I can to make that happen. So happy to answer questions from anyone in the public if you want to catch me at some point. But yeah, there's a lot going on, and we are really trying to make this meaningful and beneficial for everyone. Perfect timing, thank you.
We love the audible, it makes my job
I know, and I'm
easier.
interested in talking forever, sorry.
So as promised, I'm gonna go to Zoom. Not everyone can see, but we have 20 folks online, which does include the OWL and the ORCA. As the facilitator, I'm gonna ask if folks can to try and hand raise. On my screen, there's a little react heart at the bottom. If you click on that, then there's a raise hand function, and then you'll get queued up at the top of my screen to call on. If that doesn't work, I'll let folks unmute one by one, but I'm gonna start to see if anyone online can do raise hands. Great, I see 2. So those will be our first 2. We'll go with Kathy and then Sue. Kathy, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kathy Grace, and I live on South Main Street, and I own 4 apartments as well, so I also have several hats. And we've been flooded 3 times. So on South Main, due to water coming from other places. So I have 2 questions. One is the zoning laws, as I understand them, say that you need to raise a building to get it out of the floodplain, and in order to do that, it has to be net zero. So in other words, if the developer is going to raise the building he's going to put on that site, he has to take dirt from that site. So my question is, if you're planning on doing that, perhaps if you're doing maybe the Randall Meadow, and that could be done together, because you need to extract soil from Randall Meadow, and you could use it there. So maybe Waterbury needs to hang on to owning both for a while till that part's done. That's A. Because I went to the meeting on Randall Meadow, and it was several $1 million to extract the dirt that's going to be extracted there and move it somewhere else. So that's question 1. Thought 1. Number 2, I'm worried about the displacement of water if you don't have parking or something under it so the water can flow through it, because every time you put anything in its way, the water goes somewhere else. And we've seen that the state fixed the complex, but the water went to Randall Street and back toward us on Main Street again. So I really want to see something related to where that water is going to go if it can't go across a flat lawn. Thirdly, people keep talking about a housing crisis. And I would say that 2 years ago, I would have 25 applicants for an apartment. Okay? Many of them were people that I didn't accept because I have really bad allergies and I do all the cleaning myself. I'm allergic to animals. And so we don't allow pets and we don't allow smoking. And so that eliminates some people. So I just want to say the housing crisis, is it really a housing crisis, or is it related to people? The availability of people, I guess, for tenants. The other thing, and I have to say, I had 4 apartments for rent this summer. It never happens unless people want to buy or are moving in with their tenants, or they're buying a house, and that all happens. So there's houses out there. And I had only 15 applicants this time to 10. So the number of applicants are down. On Zillow today, there's a lot more rentals in Waterbury than I've ever seen. So I question whether we have the loss that you're thinking, and I worry that it's going to, make 90 more units here. What's it going to do to the people in Waterbury who are renting homes so that they can pay their taxes? The third thing is,
Hey,
I come
Kathy,
to these
you're at
meetings
your
and
3
everybody
minutes.
talks about the positive fiscal impact, but they
Kathy?
never talk about the positive negative impact.
Kathy, I don't want to mute you, but you're at 3 minutes.
I have no idea how many children that's going to.
All right, I'm gonna do it.
But
Kathy, you're at 3 minutes. I'm on the Zoom. I don't know if she can see this. Okay, well, oops. Kathy, we had to mute you, Kathy. You're at 3 minutes, Kathy. Thanks. Sue, you were next up.
Thank you. I just want to start by thanking the Selectboard and the manager and the Housing Task Force who've been really working hard on ways in which we can advance housing, including potentially affordable housing and density. And I know it feels like a lot to bring forward for folks, but I want to just express how important I think this idea is to explore. Kathy, I'm thrilled that you are seeing improvement in terms of your waiting list, but there is no question, if you're an employer in this state, how hard it is right now for people to find workers and for workers to find housing, and I think it's about supply. And so I'm excited. I do want to say 20 years ago I was on the Planning Commission developing a long-range plan. I was very active in revitalizing water to get downtown designation. I was the Irene Recovery Officer that worked incredibly hard, along with so many others, to make sure the state A stayed here and B did a flood resilient investment to bring workers into our downtown so we have a local economy. I worked really hard as Secretary of Transportation to advance investments. The Main Street reconstruction, the roundabout, and the bridges over the interstate, just to name 3. And those investments have made a tremendous difference. All of this, I mean, to see how our town, our community, has grown and flourished from where it was 30 years ago, but most importantly, where it was right after Irene, it's night and day. And it's because this community comes together and invests. And I do believe with an improvement in the grand list, and yes, children to fill our schools, because one of our challenges statewide is there aren't enough kids. The number of kids, the population change is dramatically older, and we need young people. And I hope this can advance. I have confidence that the hydrological studies will be done so that we wouldn't make bad choices in the way we operate or build this property if in fact it comes to that. I do have a quick question because I heard the manager speak to possibly doing some hydrological study maybe in advance of the opportunity to even purchase the land. That's what I'm trying to understand. Do we believe it's developable in a way that will not impair or put at greater risk the abutting property owners and the downtown as a whole? I appreciate the terror that people in that area have. And I want to believe that this is something, and I do trust that our select board does care about this. So I'm trying to understand sort of the timing and whether I heard you say that you might do a study first, or whether we know that in fact the property is developable in current standards that will not impose greater flood risk.
So I think in Kathy's fairness, I think we were muted at the time. You got your 3-minute timer. Thank you. Tom, do you have anything to say in response, or?
Yeah, I just want to say to Sue and everyone else that again, we are going to need some expert advice to walk us all through this process. And I think part of that touches on exactly what you said, Sue, which is making sure we do our own analysis of the flood impact of building here. So I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think that's something we should do.
Awesome. I had Jess next online. We'll have time for one more person online if anyone wants to raise their hand and then transfer back into the room. Jess, go ahead.
Thank you. Jess Newbelt. I live on Guptill Road in the center. Appreciate everybody coming to this meeting today. I'm also on the Housing Task Force, and just professionally, I work in affordable housing development, so I wanted to acknowledge those positions. I also want to underscore that we are absolutely still in a housing crisis. The Vermont Housing Needs Assessment that was updated just
Oh, we lost you, Jess.
this summer, but in 2025 has established that the state needs between, oh, can you still hear me?
Yep, you're back.
I'm just gonna keep going. The state needs between 26,000 and 30,000 new housing units before 2029 just to keep at our current vacancy level, more or less, which is 2%, less than 2% among the lowest in the nation. So we're definitely still in a housing crisis. And UVM has done a study that says that 60% of the state's downtowns and village centers are in flood zones. So if we are going to solve our housing crisis, we need to figure out how to develop on lots like this that are on town water and sewer and in a flood zone. And it can be done. I think we want to pay very careful attention to the plans that are proposed when we're able to see them. DRB is going to have a lot of work ahead of them, but I just want to say I hope that people keep an open mind because we need this housing, and there are ways to do it responsibly and in ways that will add value to the town, not add risk. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Anyone else online who's interested to speak, whether you were able to raise your hand or just want to go ahead and unmute if you can't find the hand raise? All right, not seeing any at this moment. I'm going to go back to in the room. I saw some folks approaching. Is there anyone in the room who wants to speak? Yes, go ahead.
Sit in the chair and speak loudly, is it?
That would be fabulous. Thank you so much.
Let me know if they're sneaking up on you, right? I'm Bob Finucane. I live on Randall Street. I've lived there since 1978. With a brief vacation to work otherwhere for otherwhere money. But what I want to say is two things. One is you say, well, we're going to build housing or we're not going to build housing. Actually, the housing is going to get built. It's going to be either more or less desirable from an environmental point of view. But what I really want to see is more people in the village, more people in the town. Densely located, so we'll have more children running around my yard laughing and yelling, and we'll have more kids playing baseball, more adults volunteering to be coaches and umpires, and we simply don't have enough people in the downtown to support that now. And how are we ever going to develop the ball players we need to beat the Yankees? Thank you.
Nicely done. Thanks, Bob.
What's this last name? Bob.
Someone want to follow that? Yes, go ahead.
Al Lewis, I'm a resident on Perry Hill, so we don't experience the flooding conditions of the downtown. But Kathy Grace brought up a very important point, and that is in this whole process, you're going to have to address some sort of mitigation, I believe. If you have a footprint and a cubic foot, the dimension of the building that's there, which is in the floodplain. And I looked at this back a couple of years ago, and I think the possibility would be to excavate
the material that you would need to offset the footprint, the volume, from where the smokestack is. Because the smokestack property right there, which is in the floodplain, restricts, if you look at the boundary from the footprint of that smokestack all the way across the river, that's where restriction is. That's your narrowest part, which restricts the water from flowing through. And I think you can, through hydraulic studies, you'll see that there's a better benefit to excavate in that location and take the square footage or cubic footage out of that area if possible to offset and mitigate for your building. So just think about it through your process of studies and mention it to them to study it, because I do think that's a very viable possibility. That's all. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you very much. Other folks who would like to comment? Yes, please come on up.
Thank you. My name's Tad Murray. I live at 31 Randall. I've been there since 1955. All I've seen so far is nothing but positive stuff coming from presentation. What I haven't heard is we're adding 90 new units on Randall and Park Road that now have probably no more than 40 units. Nobody's talked about the state hospital and the number of new employees that are coming back and working inside at their homes. You haven't talked about the impact to our traffic patterns. You haven't talked about an impact to nice new folks that have moved down here on South Main Street for our services. So none of that has been talked about here tonight. It's all been positive. I'd like you to think about it when you make your decision about putting 90 new units on 2 acres, I think I heard, when you're going to make it 3 times what we have right now on Randall Canal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's 3 other in the room? Yes, come on up.
I'm Emma Nixon. I live on Maple Street, Waterbury Center, but I own property on South Main Street. I agree that the Randall Meadows project needs to be a priority, but another question is, and I know the City of Barry just did it, I think we need to look into the river situation. City of Barry was just able to do some dredging of the rivers there. I think that needs to be a priority of the river itself and the Randall Meadows project before we think about building more.
Thank you. That was 4 in the room, which means I should go to online to see if anyone is able to raise a hand with the react button online that wants to comment. Anyone online who wants to comment on this? Yes, Wayne, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Wayne Quillen, 43 Randall Street. My question's about the process going forward, so let me add my thanks to the board and to Tom for all of this work and all this communication about the work. I'm a little unclear. My limited experience with procurement in the federal government is the request for qualifications would get you some interested parties who would meet some criteria that you laid out in terms of their previous experience or financial viability or whatever, and then there'd be another step with requests for proposals, and the hope would be that you get a bunch of people competing at least at the RFQ stage. So I guess my question about the process going forward is we only have one person at the one bidder, if you will, at the RFQ stage. So are we now sort of locked into whatever we can work out with them is what we've got? Or can you just kind of clarify the path forward and whether we have options there?
Sure. So the path forward is that there's a few paths forward. One is the select board can say, let's start fresh. There's no obligation to move beyond this. no obligation to buy the land. The second is that we can engage with this developer and move towards a more formal development agreement, which, as I mentioned, is going to take some time. But we only have, at this point, one interested party. So I'm not certain that putting this out to bid again is going to get us more interest beyond what it has. You can always try that, and you never know, but I feel like we made a pretty good faith effort to put this out to bid and just have the one party.
Tom, can you say how long it's been out?
We issued the bid in August. We issued the request for qualifications on August 5th. Responses were due September 30th. So it was out there for quite a bit. Put it out locally, but there's also a couple of broader state websites where it went out to. Vermont BidNet being, I think, the big one.
Thanks. Kathy, I see your hand up. Gonna go to Mike to give everyone a chance to speak once first before we do second. So Mike, you'll be next on. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks. Mike Dacey, I live on Union Street, also the executive director with Crew, which is the long-term flood recovery group in town. Wanted to speak to, I guess, a few things. I think it would be quite helpful for the town, perhaps DRB or Mike and Neil, to maybe put out something really brief, but describing kind of the limitations on what can be built on this property. There's a lot of concerns which are warranted about building in a floodplain. There's a lot of stuff that you cannot do. And there's a lot of places throughout the country where they have figured this out in the same way that they have figured out how to build on the West Coast where there are earthquakes. They figured out how to build in places where there are tornadoes and hurricanes on the Gulf Coast. So I think that would be helpful for a lot of folks who are starting to think about what we might be seeing on this property, just to know that it's probably not going to look like all the buildings that have been in town for a long time. We do have some really great examples of buildings that have been built recently and have been proven throughout the recent floods. The townhomes on O'Hare that were built in 2015, I think, have done quite well. And the state complex, as was noted, has not seen any interior flooding in the last 2 years. The other thing regarding the RFQ, this is something that I was surprised to learn was closing because I did not know that it had opened up. And it was something that Tom and I had actually brought to an architecture conference as kind of a thought exercise in May. I'm not a developer. I don't really have any skin in the game, but I was kind of trying to keep an eye on it, and it had passed me by. So I think it might be worth considering extending the timeline or the range that this is being publicized. So I'll yield my time.
Thanks, Mike. Next up, I see Amy online. Go ahead, Amy.
Hey, good evening. I was just about ready to say what that gentleman did. In my experience with all the complexities, like from a program level, associated with a 90 development unit like this, I would expect that the bid to secure vendor could be lengthier than normal, than what you would expect, like a year, up to a year, if not 2 cycles, while you're doing other work. So I would recommend revisiting that timeline as well.
Thanks, Amy. Anyone else online who hasn't commented yet, who wants to speak now? All right. I'm going to go back to the room again just to give as many people a first shot and then come back for seconds if we have time. In the room, I see one and then two. Go ahead.
Chris Vians, Waterbury Center. I've been listening to some of the comments here, and you know, some of the comments have developed questions in themselves. I understand out of the role of trying to be transparent that some of this conversation tonight is a little premature for answering questions. I have questions about, you know, what parts of this project could be subsidized during either the construction phase or ultimately at the end with subsidies for some of the housing itself, and what that looks like. You know my concerns that subsidies and grants are all the devil's way of coaxing us into higher property taxes in perpetuity. I'm not against a housing project if it can yield a positive revenue stream that doesn't burden the town. You talked about, you know, a lot of revenue, tax revenues and other revenues, water and sewer revenues. There is a cost burden that comes with any kind of development. What that means for this project is unknown at this point. I would advise the select board not to get too wrapped up in chasing too many proposals and RFQs, because ultimately, from the sounds of things, what the town's end result is out of this deal is being paid back for the property, period. We're not in it for a big profit. From the town's point of view, the tax implications will, the revenues will be part of the payoff in the end if that's the case, if it does pan out to be a positive thing. One of my questions was, is there a credit from the stormwater standpoint? Probably not for the building that was there before. Or because they cleaned up the site, are we starting from scratch? What are the possibilities of the water and sewer allocations being waived at some point if the deal gets close enough to the point where the contractor puts a little pressure on the town, and that's the only thing standing between the project being done or not being done? I've seen it before. And when it comes to these grants and subsidies, it's been mentioned too many times that all I do is chuckle under my own breath about the fact that it's not costing us any money. Anybody believes that is a fool. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. You were next, and then I'll put you in.
Can I if I just give a quick response there?
Yeah.
Just be real quick. So, Chris, and the stormwater credit being waived, I'm not aware of any history there related to that. I think any new development would be evaluated on itself. And then the water and sewer allocations being waived. So I'm also the E-Flood manager. I have no authority to waive water or sewer fees at all. Can't waive a penny. So that would have to be that board to do that.
So my only question was, just to clarify, was the Stanley Hall building that was there before? How did the state look at that flood?
I don't know. That's
issue?
Part of the state complex and everything they did.
Okay.
And just one more note on the water and sewer. So those allocation fees were in the RFQ as an attachment, so the developer would know. And I can say there was not a request to waive them, and that's a big ask. So I would think if the developer tries to say later, well, we want to make those go away. My answer was, well, where were you in September of 2025 when we asked for your initial proposal?
Thanks. Am I saying hand, Roger?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with a couple of comments earlier about extending the time period, and I was just wondering if we're under a time limit in our agreement with the state on the option to buy.
Yes, but we can extend that.
So no.
That's a better way of saying it, yeah.
Hi, my name is Marie Gervais. I live on Park Street, and I'm wondering if a developer has ever considered building, or if it could be included, that an elderly project for people that want to live independently and not be in their big house, and be able to have maybe like a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartment and live independently.
That's a great one.
I'd like to just note that I'm a DRB member, and I'm not commenting on anything regarding a specific project. I think it's noteworthy that we only had one submission for qualifications, and I submit that that is likely in large part for many of the things that were being discussed here tonight. Permitting project of this size in a flood zone is extremely onerous. 18 months is not real, it's years. Now, structures can be elevated, structures can have flood-proofing provisions. They'd have to for something like this. Al kind of mentioned it a little bit, compensatory storage, right? You got to find a place where you excavate out at least the same volume that you might be constructing in the flood zone, and in a nice way, Tom. That might segue nicely with Randall Meadows. So it can be done, but don't kid yourself that it's not extremely onerous. And I'd be very cautious about what the town ultimately commits into this process, because it's going to be really challenging to pull it off. I will say also this, if we're going to enter these types of discussions with a developer, I think we did good with getting a do, who I know to have the wherewithal and the capacity for potentially doing something like this. There aren't many options, truthfully, in our marketplace, so I would throw that in too. And then I also just want to throw out there, I continue to wonder about what we're thinking about for dealing with public safety and how that's going to be interfaced in this conversation going forward. 90 units of multi-story residential housing in the heart of the village is wonderful. We need it, I get it. But at what point are we really needing to do something else for public safety and police? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We had someone right behind. You have the present? Yeah, thank you. Come on.
My name is Michelle Downing. I'm a resident of 33 Randall Street. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to everybody here. First of all, the town for being so committed to coming, and you all for what you've done. If I think back to town meeting day, you've made a lot of progress through this initiative, so thank you to listening to everybody and the need for affordable housing and more housing. Secondly, I think it's great that the town has an opportunity to purchase the property and have it under more local control versus state control, because at this point, it would be probably in our best interest to do this. I do want to, I don't know that I really have a question, but more comments related to, as we think about building in a flood-prone area and living in a flood-prone area, just considering the fact that in the current state of FEMA and what that looks like, if something were to ever occur again, which we know it will, what does that look like in the aftermath? And so how are we thinking about that for the town and crew, as well as the residents who would purchase there or rent there, and make sure we have that infrastructure in place for them as well. And then, like our neighbor Mr. Murray said, I think that I get a little nervous having 2 little kids, seeing 90 to 180 to however many times those cars commute on Randall Street again a day. So I don't know what needs to be done about that, but just thinking through the infrastructure to support that would be helpful to see in future iterations of this plan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was 4 in the room, so now we go back online. Anyone online who hasn't had a chance to comment? Okay, seeing none, anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak yet in the room who wants to speak?
There is anyone online.
Oh, sorry, there's anyone. Go ahead, Teresa.
Thank you. I just wanted to, what I'm taking away from this is that, one, we're at the very beginning stages of a potential project or projects. And I appreciate the select board thinking about this as an opportunity, and also thinking that we may need some assistance in how we approach the community's role, the community's feedback, and the community's concerns, and just appreciate the fact that this is the beginning of these are the beginning stages, and that I, along with comments that Mr. Sheplik said earlier, I would prefer to have our community have an integral part of the decision-making process here as it rolls out in the regulatory framework of our community, than to just say, well, anybody can buy it when the state sells it. So I appreciate the forethought of the group, and know that there are a lot of questions to still be answered, and I have some faith that you'll make sure that the community is all part of that process. So thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. I'm going to take chair's prerogative and also publicly thank you as one of our state representatives for the legislative work and advocacy that you put in behind the scenes for both this property and Randall Meadow, and being able to even be at the point we are today to be having this conversation, and just acknowledge yourself and Tom Stevens as our reps for doing that work. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm very excited actually about the Randall Meadow project, and I hope that we are successful in gaining some grant funding to have that happen sooner rather than later. And again, another complicated project, but I appreciate the fact that people are willing to take on the stuff that really is, when it seems is so integral to our downtown and the future of our downtown. So thank you.
Anyone else online? I need to pause for a moment online because that took a minute. All right, now I'm going back to the room, and there was a couple more hands, I think. Yes, please.
I'm Alec Tuscany. I live at 86 South Main Street. Public safety was just touched on a minute ago, and that's what my comment's going to be. We currently have 2 state troopers, alternating shifts. Some people think that's adequate, others don't, relative to public safety coverage. With the addition of potentially 90 housing units there, 26 at 51 South Main, 8 units maybe up behind the school, are we going to look at the need to, in some manner, add additional police coverage that may be brought about by just an increase in population? And 2, are we to the point with the fire department, which is, I think you all know, is all voluntary? Would there possibly be the need to have 1 full-time person? to handle paperwork and everything else relative to the fire department. I think I'm speaking correctly. The ambulance service added full-time people because it just had too much to cover. So again, I'm concerned about public safety. I personally do not believe the two-person alternating state police shifts. There's going to come a time when it's just not adequate for sufficient public safety.
Thank you. Other folks? Yes.
I'm Mal Culbertson. I live on Winooski Street. I just wanted to make a comment. I'm really excited about this potential project. I very much understand the concerns around flood mitigation. I volunteered in the 2023 and 2024 floods. I actually really appreciate Mike's comment about the condos at O'Hare Court and up on that street. That's where I was doing a lot of flood stuff, and really encouraging to see more houses being elevated to allow floodwater to get under it. So I think there's a lot of options for this project to make it more flood resilient, and that is really exciting because the prospect of 90 units downtown in a walkable area that has access to public transit, admittedly limited public transit, but some, that's really exciting. And I just want to stress the benefits to our community by having more new people come in. I think we've all seen struggles to fill school board seats and commission seats and all these different boards that don't get enough people in them. And the farmers market closing because there weren't enough people to run that or take on that effort. And so having fresh, people coming in, people want to get involved in their community. This isn't just going to be more burden, quote unquote, on the town. These are new community members and neighbors who are going to want to get involved. So I just want to highlight that this is a really exciting opportunity to not only add a lot of very needed housing, especially if we're able to do affordable or market rate housing, worker housing. I think that's really key. I think we've seen, housing prices get very expensive here, and, I've seen a lot of $2,000, $2,200, $2,400 a month apartments. For that to be affordable, you have to be making over $70,000 a year at least. And if you're making $20 an hour, you're making less than $40,000 a year. So having more housing makes Waterbury more livable for more people, and that means more people to volunteer and get involved in everything that makes our community special. So I'm very excited about this. I definitely would love to see other options included in there around green spaces and sustainability. That area is really beautiful. So anything we can do to keep spaces green outside of the building. We can encourage, heat pumps and energy efficiency in the building, sort of like with 51 South Main. Having them, include a renewable energy element, I think would be really fascinating and really nice down there. Yeah, generally very excited about it and excited to see, us planting the seeds for a project that will take several years that we'll be really grateful for 4 years from now when it's done, or fingers crossed 4 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you. Other folks in the room? Yep, go ahead.
Hi, Evan Carl Hoffman. I live on Butler Street. Last couple of people have mentioned 51 South Main Street. That project was initially promising, I forget the exact number, but between 40 and 50 units, I believe. And they've ended up with about half of that. Do you have a sense, based on the secret sketches you've seen, whether 90 units is actually plausible in that space? Or is it going to end up being less than that, or maybe more than that?
My impression is that there's a lot more room for 90 units if the developer had wished to be even bigger. The sketches I've seen, there's a lot of green space incorporated in that.
Also, do you have any sense why there was only one response? Did anybody get in touch and say, hey, we'd love to do this, but we don't have capacity, or we're not going to touch that, it's in the flood zone, or anything else?
No, you never know. I think in reality, there's not a hugely long list of developers in Vermont who can take on a project of that size. I think we should definitely be part of it.
Is it possible to maybe reach out to the usual suspects and ask them why they didn't?
Sure.
Yeah. Because I feel like only having one option to look at this stage is a little bit concerning.
Thanks. Other folks in the room? Yep.
Cheryl Brewer, Clover Lane. So whatever decision is made on this property is going to be a long-term decision that's going to affect this town for forever. Some of you may or may not be here when this comes to fruition, but property owners will be here and have to take on whatever the side effects are from whatever we build. I'm also concerned about infrastructure, public safety, the roads. We don't even know what 51 South Main Street is going to look like with traffic yet. So cautionary tale, if you look at Morrisville, they went a little too fast, too much. They've got some problems, and they have a police force. There's some other towns that also went a little too fast, too much, and it's affected their infrastructure. So I'm just asking that as you guys make these important decisions for this town, for the property owners, people that pay these taxes, just keep that in mind on whatever that long-term process in that project is going to look like.
Thank you very much. Other folks who want to comment? Seeing none, Kathy, you've had your hand up for quite a long time. Would you like to go again?
Yes. I'm just saying, okay. It was helpful to listen to everyone. I do want to make a couple of statements. One is about the traffic. I have noticed recently, like between 3 and 6 o'clock, the traffic on South Main Street is horrible. Trying to get in and out of my driveway is awful. It's backed up for, I don't know if it's the light situation or whatever, but because we just did South Main Street, there should be a traffic study done when you do this because there's no place to build another lane anywhere. So all that traffic's got to come out onto Main Street, and I think that's a foreseeable problem. The other thing is, just to recap, can you tell everybody what's just going to happen? This is my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong. The town is going to buy this lot from the state for $400,000. And then we're selling it to Do, or we're owning it together with Do? And what if we're owning it together with Do, what is the town's liability in terms of what happens there? Can you clarify that? Because I'm not sure if we're co-owners of that lot, or you're selling the lot, or you're selling the lot for more than $400,000? Can you please clarify that?
Sure. So the first is, I can't yet disclose what the offer for the lot was.
Can I just pause for a minute? Tom has a very soft voice, and Tom, can you start again and project? And can I ask to limit side conversations just so everyone here and online can hear? Thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Tom.
In my defense, my dad was an Army guy and has a booming voice, so kind of taking the opposite. So I can't comment on the purchase price, what we were offered for the lot, but there was an offer for the lot. Secondly, Kathy asked about ownership going forward. I will say from now until the day I die, municipalities shouldn't be in the business of owning housing. So we want to transfer this to someone who's in that business. It's not our expertise at all. That's at least my recommendation to the board, and I will make that recommendation in perpetuity.
Tom,
Okay, but is that the board's opinion as well? Because I think that's part of the confusion. As a taxpayer, I don't think our town needs to be in the real estate business. And I'm unclear who's gonna own this, when they're gonna own it, where it's gonna happen, where the liability is gonna be. I think that's what a lot of people are feeling. There's just not enough, we know how you got to where you are now, but we want to know what's going to happen in the future in terms of ownership, liability, and how you're ever going to do mitigation if you give up the randos, how that's all going to mesh, I guess, Tom. I mean, I understand what the area is now, like, let's do housing, but I just also feel like the village is just being scrunched, housing, and we don't even look ahead and say, well, where's the infrastructure going through? We don't even have a right-hand turn to go to the railroad station, which would help a lot with some traffic alleviation. I mean, even the simple things. So those are some basic stuff I think we need to get answers to give to people.
Okay, well, again, if there is an agreement going forward, my recommendation to the board would be we would not buy the property from the state until we have an agreement, in essence, in real time, to transfer it to a developer. And we would spend the next period of time working with the developer and negotiating to try to come up with a final site plan. So we would not transfer this property to a developer until we have 100% clarity about what is going to happen on that property.
So do you think that, and I know people have spoken out about having a flood study, a hydrologist study for the flooding, but maybe you should add to that a traffic study.
Okay, thanks, Kathy.
I don't know where it's gonna go, where the traffic's gonna go.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm gonna let iPhone go next because they haven't had an opportunity to speak yet. Could you let us know who you are before you comment? And you need to unmute yourself.
Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted, whoever iPhone. Okay, working on it. I'm still one. We're doing real-time virtual participation. Okay, I see a hand. We still can't hear you. You're muted. Oh, it looks like this is, okay, asking to unmute.
He's muted on his end.
She's on mute.
We are working on that.
We got that.
If you want to keep working on this, I'll see if there's anyone in the room who wants 3 minutes while we work on technology.
I believe she's on mute.
Yep, I think we're working on it.
Mute
Do you want to leave and come back?
I'll fill that hole for a second.
Okay, we are on second. Anyone else for first? You all cared enough on your Monday to come out, so I want to give an even playing field. All right, go ahead, Phil.
So I'm going to try to speak so the public can hear me well, too. I have talked a lot about the narrative that more economic development means lower property taxes. Tom pointed out the possible revenue sources that we would get from this project and with some of our other projects. But Alec just took a large part of it with his comment to increase police department and fire department employees, perhaps one full-time fire department employee and some additional police force cost as well. The fact that we're creating a town that's going to be much more congested down here, and there's been no discussion tonight about if the state police come back, what impact that's going to have on this little village as well, on top of the 90 units that are there and the 27 units that are over here. Dealing with all those issues takes revenue, tax revenue. And what my biggest concern about, and I conveyed this to one of our select board members the other day, trying to solve the so-called housing crisis and in turn creating another housing crisis, and that is driving the people that are here now out of their homes for the sake of people who perhaps want to come here to live. The people that have been here for a fairly lengthy part of their life, if not all of their life, deserve the right to stay here. And we should be focusing on that first. And if we can make that work, and we can make costs affordable as a community and have a decent surplus revenue stream and fix all these other issues that this continual growth seems to accumulate, including the opportunity of more drug problems and more outside crime problems, because as your town gets bigger, it attracts all of that. And that compounds the problems even more and takes yet more revenue to solve. So we need to be careful what we wish for.
Thanks. All right, checking in on iPhone again, online. How is the muting, unmuting happening? Has it vanished? Okay, no iPhone. Comes back. Anyone else in the room who wants to comment? Anyone else online? If not, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Mary Cohen, and I live on Park Street, so not too far from this property. And I have not lived here my whole life, but I've lived here for close to 18 years. And been on the planning commission, was very involved in the flood hazard regulations after Irene. And I want to put my trust in the folks here that we've elected and hired to make these decisions, considering the input. I am 100% in favor of having housing on that property. And yes, we need to take into consideration the flood risk, the traffic risk. I don't think more people means more crime. I would like to see, I go with the gentleman who talked about kids playing ball and families contributing to our community, and the woman who made a really good point about people are not stepping up, and those of us who've lived here longer are getting older, so new families, new blood is not a bad thing. We live, you know, our main street is our 2 state highways. I mean, there's only so much you can do. Traffic is a problem at that time of day. I don't think we're ready for some overpass. But sometimes I think that's what we need is, you know, but that's not realistic. We're fortunate to have the people who can drive through town and stop and contribute to our economic vitality. So I do hope all of the suggestions I know and trust will be taken into consideration, and I hope there's a way to make all of the timelines and little details dovetail and work, but thank you for all the work you've done so far.
Thank you. For iPhone again. Any other questions or comments? You have this scheduled. Go ahead.
I was just going to address a couple of comments that were made. Kathy asked if the select board was in agreement with Tom that we not take possession of this until we have a buyer. And I think that we've exercised that caution and looked at this option and not acted on it until we have a clear buyer and that we have the confidence that this is something that we and the town wants to take forward. So I'm just saying that while I was chairing the select board. And then Marie asked about whether there'd be a possibility of senior housing coming out of this. And my understanding is that seniors are automatically qualified as for affordable housing for 65 plus are considered qualified for what's considered affordable housing. So that could easily be part of this package.
Thank you.
As long as they're accessible, affordable and accessible.
Okay, gotta be careful because I gotta run the meeting. Mike, can I just hand up next?
I too, I want to thank all of you for all of your thoughtful comments regarding this. This project, I'm not going to make no bones, is controversial. People are on both sides of the equation, and I don't have a problem with that. Public input is really important. I know I've been in the development and housing world for over 40 years in Vermont, and if you look at development, sometimes has to take place, especially in village settings, on floodplain property. If we would cease to develop on floodplain property, you'd probably see little to no development. You look at some counties in the United States, the entire county is in a floodplain area. You know, there are some other municipalities that the entire community is in a floodplain. We need to do responsible work, as everyone has said. I don't want to develop and create other flood problems. I think with studies, with proper engineering, things can be done in a proper way to develop the property for a housing project, and we could have the needed resources that our town, you know, a lot of people have said we need housing in this community. I agree with that. And I think there are ways to work through the floodplain issues, the public safety issues, et cetera. And, you know, but don't say, no, we don't want to have it and stop anywhere. I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I see Anna couldn't raise her hand online, but go ahead, Anna, now if you have a comment. Stand by is what the chat says online, so we're working on more technology. Okay, sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
One sec.
Okay.
I'm reading the chat live. Hand raise, stand by, adjusting permissions.
Got it. No permission to use the microphone.
Anna, how's it going? Anna, I'm gonna wait and Kane's gonna go because I didn't see him. Go ahead, Kane.
I heard a lot of really good comments, both going both directions. I didn't really hear anyone diametrically opposed to this project outright, right? Everyone has concerns about flood mitigation or policing or road width. But we've come a long way from when I first got elected to this board on where everyone stands on giant housing projects in the town of Waterbury. I think the recognition, I think our community, myself and a lot of our community recognize that the housing crisis is not getting any better, and it's drawing economic vitality away from Waterbury at a time when we need to increase it. And I think some of the things that were said, especially by our former town manager, Bill Sheplick, about we either get a say in what happens on this property or we don't. And I think that's pretty telling of what we've been after here and the amount of work we've put in at the select board level and the immense amount of work that our town managers put in to making sure that we do have a seat at the table when it comes to this property and making sure that our entire community has a voice about this property and about housing in downtown Waterbury.
Thanks, Kane. I'm checking back in online. We had Anna. I don't know if it's going any better. in the unmuting category. Oh, now in the waiting room. Tech is fun. And then I will take the liberty, Danny, I think you are online on an iPhone. I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself now. Anna or Danny? Go ahead and unmute yourself. Yes,
Oh my
Anna.
gosh.
Yep,
Hello.
it's happening.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Anna. Wow, I'm so sorry. I'm a millennial, and that's like really embarrassing. Hello, my name is Anna Shelley. I am a former South Main, brand new North Main resident, long-time listener, first-time caller. A couple of quick points. I just want to say that I have been, as I just said, listening to a lot of select board meetings for a few years. And I've been super disheartened by a lot of the discourse. Today is not the case. There's been a lot of really compassionate and smart conversations going on. So I just want to shout out the select board and all of us for really coming through on that. I just wanted to point out there were a couple of comments made about the implications that this will have for homeowners and property taxes. And while I certainly don't want to sort of dampen that reality and the burden that homeowners do have in paying those property taxes, home ownership, especially multiple home ownership, is a privilege. Affordable housing is not. And I just want to highlight the fact that when Juggerman was talking about, we should be focusing on making things, better for the folks that have lived here for a long time before we really tackle these projects. I don't think that sort of us versus them mentality is productive. And I absolutely think that both of those things can happen at the same time. And in fact, one could argue that they couldn't happen without the other. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. We've got two more in the room. Martha has not spoken yet. Go ahead.
Martha Staskis. I live up in the center. I'm on the Planning Commission. Was on the DRB for way many years before the Planning Commission. And I just want to add to the other comments regarding, one, the thoughtful process that the Select Board is going through. I think that's tremendous. The idea of starting early with communications with the residents, with all of us, is very helpful. We've been talking about this project through the whole Phase 1 bylaw rewrite and incorporated some thinking into that along with flood mitigation. And so I just am echoing the positive comments that we've heard tonight and continue. I think the Planning Commission, speaking for the Planning Commission, we are certainly watching this, and I think that some of the new bylaw language will also help the DRB when it gets, if and when it gets all the way down there. There's some more controls that through the design review to help ensure the community is considered and protected and thought about in the process. And thank you guys for what you're doing.
Thank you. Do you want to tell us again?
Hi, Pete, I live in Parkville. So the question is, if we don't buy that parcel as a town, is the state even going to sell it, or are they just going to fold it back into the part of the whole complex? Because did we approach them to buy it, or did they approach us saying, hey, we're going to split this off, do you want it?
So I strongly suspect that if we don't buy it, they would sell it. And I say that because the impression I got, not the impression I got, what I was very much told directly by the state is they hang on to property unless they really feel 100% they will have no future use, because when they buy property, it's generally for a project, oftentimes controversial, and they oftentimes pay a premium for the land. And so if they feel like there's any public use, they're just going to hang on to the property. It doesn't cost them anything to have a vacant lot. So I think for the state to sell a property means it truly is surplus to them and they just don't have a need for it. So is it a guarantee that if we say no, they'll sell it? No, but they're also hanging on to something that they can sell. And like anyone else, they've got a budget to pass, so I suspect they would sell it if we said no, just based on the process that we went through.
And then to follow up, so if we do then sell it to Duke, for example, right? What holds them, besides the DRB, from doing what they say they're going to do? As opposed to, say, 51 South Main, where it proposes one thing and it's turning into something a little different, as far as like who's going to live there and what financing options there are and what have you. Does that make sense? In the sense of, how do we hold them to it?
What we hold them to it is a very well-written contract.
And then, do they just pay fines if they break that, or do we stop everything? Because if they can afford to break the contract, or just pay a few fines, like Pilgrim Park, he just paid a few fines because he raised the grade. And he's like, yeah, paid the fine, I'm good. But everyone else still got foot.
I suppose to be determined. I guess I wasn't thinking about it from that perspective, that they would simply, and anyone would enter into contract with the town with the intent of just paying a fine.
Yeah. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying they would, but it's in the realm of possibility because it's happened before in this town. So just, thank you.
Go ahead, I see there and there.
Hi, Tom Stevens from Waterbury, State Representative. I just wanted to clarify a little bit on the process that Steve was just asking about. To get to this point, I also want to appreciate the Select Board in its many iterations since Irene in particular, of being patient and wanting to get the opportunity to see if we can develop this property. The state has been reluctant for many, many years to subdivide it. And the subdivision is what's important here in terms of what it may do if we don't buy that property. The property has been put up for sale through RFPs or RFIs in the past and has had similar responses, minimal responses. We were offered the property in 2014 for $350,000, except that it still had 2 buildings on it, which would have cost close to, I believe, $2 million to remove at the time. So we chose not to buy the property at that time. The buildings were subsequently removed at the state's expense. Still, they were not able to find buyers that were not us. But trying to extract and get the town to have this opportunity to develop it with its own desires in the forefront has been at least a 10-year process legislatively. We had to pass a law through the State House to allow the state to negotiate with the town and to give it a right of first refusal, and also with Randall Meadow. So it's a long process, it's a painful process, it's a very incremental process, and yet here we are, as Teresa said, at the very beginning of what this process is going to be at. But some of us have been at this for, I don't know, how long has it been since Irene? How long?
14 years. 14.
Seems like just yesterday. So the idea of if we choose not to buy this property in the time that we have, the legislation will then get mooted, and so it would still be available for sale by the state. The sale would have to be done again legislatively for them to do it, but they now have a property that, because of this transaction, has been subdivided, which has been a long, laborious process to get to. So it's not a hit or miss. We've come so far just to get the opportunity to be at this conversation tonight, and I'm really grateful for that. I'm really grateful that this Select Board has been advocating for it, and it's a very complicated process, many moving parts, lots of funding issues, and we're just at that beginning. So patience, please.
Thank you. Just in the good time, we had you right here in the blue baseball hat.
I think I'm supposed to thank the board and Tom and everyone else, so thank you. Dustin Spence, Randall Street. Really specific, and maybe we don't know the answer Does Dew have any experience managing housing, or are they just construction? And we know like someone like Down Street Housing does have that experience.
Yep, I put some information on the website today. They do have an ownership arm for their company.
And they manage affordable housing, or?
I don't know about affordable housing. I know they've built a number of buildings in concert with affordable housing developers, but I think the affordable housing groups themselves, like Down Street, manage the housing.
So time check, we're at 8:21. This is scheduled to 8:30. I think the board probably will discuss and we'll talk a little bit about next steps and doing a last call of anyone who hasn't spoken yet who wants to add a public comment on this. Yes, go ahead.
I just got a quick question because I get very confused. Could you define for me what affordable versus workforce housing is? Those categories. When you put an RFP out there for someone to bid on it, what are those categories specific? I know market rate. I understand that quite well. Right? What is affordable? What is workforce? And how does this direct one or the other? Thank you.
Alternate has it right here.
Yeah, I'm struggling to come up with the HUD percentage that I want to cite.
So the HUD percentage for affordable is 30% of your income or below. Workforce housing is a fancy, handy-dandy term that got thrown around to describe affordable that a lot of working class people don't really appreciate because it comes across as like proletarian zone from 1984. They effectively mean the same thing, but workforce housing is more pushed by employers, right? Where an employer would be involved in a project to build housing, and that would be their workforce housing, right? So affordable housing is really, the aim. Workforce housing is a phrase.
Any other last comments? You did already speak once, but go ahead.
Just a quick, to build off of what Kane was saying.
I know, just for the Zoom, I'm so sorry.
Just for the Zoom, not for you.
The Zoom, the recording, posterity.
So just to build on what Kane was saying, over 50% of renters in the state are cost burden, which is they're paying more than 50% of their incomes for housing, and that includes everything that goes along with it, not just rent. It can go for food, it can go for utilities. So there's a real stress in those. That's closer to workforce housing. 200,000 Vermonters file income taxes for less than $60,000 a year. Where do they live? And how are they going to pay for any kind of market housing? So that's what we're working with in general. It's hard for people to understand that there are plenty of people who are paying more than 50% of their income for basic housing needs, and that's what the housing crisis is about.
Thank you. Can I ask a follow-up? Because I don't I don't think you quite understood my question. You got one submission. So that's essentially a sole source. Someone talked about government procurement earlier. If you enter into this relationship, were the conditions put in there that a certain percentage would be market rate, or could they go full bore one category?
I'd have to look at the specifics of the RFQ, but what I recall we put in the RFQ was a preference for an affordable housing component. And those specifics are something that we've now got to work on with the developer if we decide to move forward.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Great. Last call, then I get to do a newsletter plug because you all are here and you all get to learn how to get all of our select board agendas, which will be shared.
Alyssa, can you read what?
Yes, thank you. We do have the chat happening, which is always really hard. Tom, you have the chat, I do not. So for public record, we're going to read the chat so that folks have it. It looks like Kathy Grace has a comment.
Oh, hang on, there's a cousin. Yeah. So from Kathy Grace. Hi, we own the property in Waterbury Center that Cliff now owns. We intended to do housing there, but for many reasons, including traffic issues, we were unable to develop it. If people in town could move into smaller quarters, their larger homes would be available for families. The townhouses behind the Best Western are well sought after. It creates a community for, sorry, I'm getting there.
You almost had it.
You didn't read the first one all the way, Tom.
I'm sorry.
He's trying.
We're going for 3. Oh, there we go.
If that helps. It's still, okay, smaller communities, but still be a part of the community they love. Is that a possibility? And then if people in town can move onto smaller quarters, or larger homes will be available for families. The townhouses behind the Best Western are well sought after. It creates community for like-minded elders to stay engaged without all the maintenance of homeownership.
Great. Okay. I'm gonna call it, unless there's someone, oh, you haven't, go ahead.
Very quick question.
Yeah.
Lawrence Dennis, 10 Randall Street. 2 questions. Do we have historical coding that would require the developer to meet certain kind of design, since Randall Street has a lot of historical houses? If it's an extension, I would hope that there would be some alignment. Secondly, once the developer, whoever it is it going to be rental or purchase?
Great. I think Tom was writing notes. We have a lot happening. Did you get
So
those?
the historic district is not our review, that's a state level review.
Oh.
And then the form of ownership of the units is not something that is public yet.
Okay, thank you. Just a concern question.
All right. If you want to close the chat, Tom, I'm co-hosting this meeting as Fire Station Meeting Owl because we don't have 2 USB-C connections, so just in transparency, that's why that's happening. I'm now going to screen share the Selectboard page on the town website. Let's see if I'm doing it. I think I'm doing it, Tom.
I'm just going to save the chat real quick. 'Cause I
Okay.
have to.
And just note that as I'm screen sharing, here's all of the select board emails, but most importantly, I want to highlight, would you like to receive an email when a new select board agenda becomes available? If so, please subscribe here. You can subscribe to not only the select board, but all of our boards and commissions. So if you want to get every planning commission, every housing task force agenda, I say that because I think we've acknowledged that there is a lot of unknowns and we don't have a timeline of next steps. And as chair of the select board, I have trouble keeping up with everything that's happened. So the best way to make sure you're aware and can review agendas when this continues to come up is to look there. Our regular select board meetings are the 1st, 3rd, and 5th Mondays of the month at 6:30 p.m. So our next meeting is going to be later on in October on the 20th. I would say it's almost a sure thing that this will be on the agenda for further discussion beyond what we covered tonight. And you can also always reach us at our emails. Board members, Tom, other things to end.
I was going to add, you'll never feel lonely if you sign up for all of the emails.
And I also want to add that our monthly newsletter, the Municipal Dispatch, is now also something you can sign up for. Same place on the website.
Which is great. It's great.
There's also a couple printed copies here. I'll just echo the thanks that has already been expressed. Again, it's Monday night on a pretty warm evening, and so I appreciate everyone taking time out of the sunshine or your free time to be here, learn about your community, offer your comments. The hot seat is not intimidating, so again, recognize that we're all community members here too. Feel free to contact us individually if you have other follow-up. Is there any other next steps tonight, or are we planning to just have this on the October 20th select board meeting for further discussion?
I think the 20th agenda.
Great, so we'll plan to revisit this at our next regularly scheduled meeting on October 20th. Again, the response to the RFQ, to the extent it can be posted, is on the municipal website, so also recognizing folks want time to read, review, digest, including us board members, and that we'll have more to revisit then. All right, any other last comments on this item? Right.
Yeah, listen.
Okay.
Just one.
And Bill, it's 8:30, so my facilitation skills are like, we almost got it.
We've taken more time than I wanted to. The gentleman who asked about the historic district, and Tom said the historic review is states, and that's true. But just remember that Billy Big Door told us earlier in the evening that it's part of the design review district. So it's not that there's not going to be any review of its design, it just isn't a formal historic district design.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And I think that's also the DROD, as Dana called it. We like to review our acronyms, Design Review Overlay District. That does apply and include this property.
Yep.
All right, 8:31.
On purpose.
I will move us to our next item for all who would like to stay to review draft of local option tax policy. And again, thanks to everyone for being here and for the comments. And the select board, we have a draft document, and it's also posted on that select board page on the town website. And I will turn it over to Tom.
And I just want to say really quickly, if you ever think,
Hey folks, so either the choices, if you want to keep talking, you got to go in the hall, or if you want to stay here and listen to Tom talk about local option tax policy, you can do that. We can't have both and have understandable audio. Tom had a last comment. Go ahead, Tom.
I just want to say very quickly, if you ever think that your voice is not heard at this meeting, I think this local action tax policy is definitive proof that you are wrong, because this has been championed by Sandy Sabin for a while, and it's now on the agenda. So if you show up at the meeting and champion an issue, it's always taken up. So I just wanted to introduce that.
Thank you.
So just for the board's edification, the approved use of funds is not something that I had changed from the original buckets that were improved, with the exception that I think I got a typo in there and need to relabel 1, 2, 3, 4, but that's Friday afternoon work sometimes. I did add some aspirations, which I think were generally consistent with what I've heard from the board over the years about how we would intend to spend this. And one of those that is a bit new is really item 3, which is to say that if there's going to be some sort of mid-year unplanned use of funds, the aspiration is to warn it, so that way it's really clear to the public that there's a specific expenditure of the local option tax here. Aspiration, not a firm policy goal, because sometimes that's impossible under things like emergency circumstances. But I just wanted to note that out, and the buckets are the same, I just got to correct the labeling. But capital items, affordable housing, economic development, community vitality, streamline operations, improve fund balances, and create a reserve. So none of those are changed from the original adopted policy.
Tom, could you just back us up to what is and isn't in the town's approved charter and where this language comes from in terms of what was presented to voters when we created the charter?
Sure. What was presented to voters was essentially the charter simply allows the authority to levy the tax. There are some municipal charters that go into extreme detail about how it is spent, and there are some that go into very little detail but also dictates how it's spent. There are municipal charters that simply say every penny of the local option tax will go towards reducing property taxes. It's just a general revenue, and that's it. So the town of Waterbury's charter is not limiting whatsoever. And during that process, the town select board at the time talked about what they thought was a valid policy and good ways to spend the local option tax. And so the four general buckets, which are fairly broad, but the first bucket is essentially debt management. We either use it to reduce existing debt, or we use it to pay cash for things that we wouldn't otherwise be able to pay cash for. So debt management, avoid interest, manage your capital expenses through the local option tax. The second is a broader category, which is about, I describe it as intelligent community investment. So that's affordable housing, that's economic development, that's community vitality. So I give some examples in this draft policy. Community vitality, I can define as recreation infrastructure, which might be a little different from things like a road or a bridge. Community vitality, I think, is investment in flood mitigation efforts. Affordable housing, I think, is obvious enough. And other investments to improve the economic condition. One answer I can give to that is the utility district owns water and sewer infrastructure, but the town has the option of saying we want to expand it and offer its water and sewer to new customers. And from that perspective, the town could take on that project. Wouldn't own it in the end, EFUD would, but that's not an uncommon model in the state of Vermont. Then one bucket is essentially modernizing municipal operations, and one big item there, I think, is technology investments, which oftentimes have a long-term gain, but there's a transition cost that sometimes can be pretty steep. So I think technology to make us cheaper, better, more efficient long-term, or ability to communicate with you better through technology is a good investment. And then the last is just improve our fund balance, which means the local option tax can just be used to improve the town's bottom line overall in a myriad of ways. So those 4 buckets were essentially created. I'm not suggesting that they need to be changed because I think they're good and appropriate. Just wrote up a bit of a more formal policy than what we had before. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that's great, thank you. I like to show my work, so we can screen share the charter if we want to. We can screen share the presentation that folks adopted. Does select board members have questions or comments to start?
I think this was really well written. But this doesn't, this doesn't go farther than what I think a lot of us already assumed local option tax buckets described. I think the buckets are broad, and they're broad on purpose. I particularly like aspiration number 4, aspires to avoid using. I would probably change the word in there a little bit, whereas aspires not to use would be my on-the-fly edit. That's what I do.
Other questions or comments? Can't see the. Nothing is being shared on Zoom. Nothing is being shared in the room either. Thank you. So we'll go Billy, and then here, Peter, I believe.
So Billy Vigor. First of all, I think it's great. I think it's right for you guys to write down and be clear about what you're doing, recognizing that you're tying your own hands, and where your hands aren't tied. When your hands are tied, you go back to the town. I think that's a great idea. I don't know what role you want the aspirations to play in the document. Is it interpreting what happens when there's an ambiguity on the use of funds? Is it just a preamble? And the reason why I raise that is my biggest concern is number 3 in the aspirations actually doesn't look like an aspiration. It looks like something where you want to tie your hands. And so I would put that at the bottom and say, hey, if there's a surplus, we can't use it without approval. It doesn't look like that. So it creates that ambiguity in what you want. And I don't want to fly spec, but if it's going to be an approved use of funds and you're tying your hands, I would say the expenditures of funds shall only be limited to the following areas, not focus. That's an ambiguous term that I don't even know what that means. So again, if you're going to tie your hands, do it clearly. If you want an exception, write an exception, make it clear, because you don't want to spend the time fighting over this, because when you're spending other people's money, everybody in the room is going to fight about it. So be clear, is what I would say. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going back to my notes to see, was it Pete or Peter?
Yeah, Pete.
Pete, thank you, come on up.
No, thanks. So I'm wondering about this with the local options tax. It's a new revenue stream, and it seems like with FEMA, that's a revenue stream that's kind of going away somewhat. So I'm wondering if some money should be set aside, for example, for culvert replacement or other issues that might happen in the future where you have some, weather events that wipe out things that you can't expect a reimbursement, because I think that's almost foolhardy these days, and you know they're going to get worse, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm wondering if there is a way to carve out a certain savings account, if you will, from the local options tax that helps people helps the town recover when there's unexpected costs.
Thank you very much. Tom, do you want to respond to that at all regarding
Yeah.
fund balance?
So it's a great point. There's a couple ways to create what amounts to a special reserve, Peter, and the ironclad way is for the voters to do it. If the voters say at town meeting day, whatever dollar amount or percentage of this goes into a lockbox that's only to be used for flood mitigation or flood recovery, then the voters have had their say. And that's essentially what the voters have done with the town's tax stabilization fund. Part of the reason I haven't advocated for that is because we already have $1 million tax stabilization fund that is in that lockbox. So I feel like with this revenue source, some flexibility is appropriate, but if you through whatever means, just advocating or some formal way wanted to petition the board, that's your right as citizens to put this into specific boxes.
Other questions? Yeah, coming up, and then I see Kathy online.
Are you
Hold
ready
on.
for me?
We have one in the room first, then you. Go ahead, Joe.
Joe Camarada, Maple Street. I know at a previous select board meeting, there was a discussion around the budgeted monies, if not spent in the year the budget, are they carried over? I don't see that the policy explicitly addresses that either way. Is that already been resolved, or is that beyond the scope of the policy?
Falls to the bottom line right now. Meaning, so there's a few types, there's legal reserves that can be created. And then there's the other end, which is called, in government terms, undesignated fund balance, which is where everything falls. So if we have general fund money, if the town doesn't spend, all its budgeted amount on pens and papers, it falls to the undesignated fund balance. There's no exact special reserve created here. But that being said, we treat it a little bit like it's sacrosanct, because we have tracked it, to the penny. So you can still have an undesignated fund balance, but you can know exactly how much that was caused by a surplus in the local option tax.
But more importantly, if there's monies that are allocated in the tax, if they're not spent in that year, are they available in following years?
I believe they are, because the voters have committed to those expenditures. And that's really no different than something like, buying a truck, which we might not make the expenditure in a year, but we sometimes make the commitment.
Right. Thanks.
Tom, does that make it a designated fund balance?
Now you're getting into auditor speak.
And the answer?
The answer is, the auditors would say, no, this is undesignated fund balance unless there's a formal action to designate it. That being said, we can treat it like it's designated fund balance, which I think gives everyone the best of both worlds.
Kathy, you had a question? Go ahead.
I do have a question. I am wondering how much information was given to voters before the vote on the local option tax about how it was going to be spent. And this is my reason for this is I think this was sort of came to fruition last year at town meeting when the gentleman or person stood up about the bike path, when you were giving money to the bike path repair on Perry Hill, and he went off on how they donated so much for groceries and not groceries, food, and how much for accommodations. I don't think most Waterbury residents realize that they are paying that 1% on propane that comes to their house, on their utilities, on anything that's delivered to the 05676 zip code, including Amazon Prime. So I feel like some of the expenditures that you guys are wanting for a lot have to do with people who are not full-time residents of Waterbury who pay this 1% on much more than food and accommodations. And I think there's a miscommunication about that. And when I voted, I said, oh great, we're gonna have this local option tax, we'll finally be able to repair culverts and, get a fire truck, or the money will be set aside for all these repairers that we need, or maybe we'll get a community center and it will come from that. And instead, it seems to be at the whim of what the select board people decide is what the local option tax should be used for. And I've talked to many taxpayers since this has been going on, and many of them did not realize that they were going to be taxed on everything. So it feels like we're paying more than our share, but we don't have much of a voice in where it goes.
Tom, can we get a clarification on what we tax?
It's essentially a retail sales tax. So everything you pay retail sales taxes on. So you're not going to pay it on groceries at the grocery store. You would pay it on a meal downtown.
No, wait a minute. You are paying it on groceries. You're paying on anything but food.
Generally correct.
I feel like I am paying probably $400 more a year in taxes, in local option taxes, that do not go for the direct benefit of reducing my taxes in another way. And I think a lot of people feel the same way I do now that they understand it. So by you having this, I don't know how to say it, how you want to spend your money doesn't coincide with me paying $500. I thought, okay, that would reduce me. I'm giving my share to help pay for infrastructure or whatever, and it's at your guys' choice. So I have an issue with what you were saying in terms of how you want to spend the local option tax, and I truly do not believe that most people in this town realize how much they're paying on it and what it's being used for.
Tom, I have some documents queued up. Is it okay if I try? So again, select board chair prerogative, who loves to do research. And admittedly, the municipal website is not the most navigable thing. Certainly would never see that. Starting with the charter, which Tom also quoted in the memo, that's posted under today's meeting. This is the statute language of what the charter that voters voted on approved. It allows us to do two things. One, have a local option tax on all four categories that are allowed by state law, and two, clarifies the authority of the municipal manager. So this is the charter as was voted on.
I get that, Alyssa, but I think all people realize.
So now I'm going to the presentation, the two informational meetings that we had for folks. Again, this is posted on the website. This is dated 10/20/2023. And it specifically notes the draft policy on utilizing the local option tax. So I guess I would just frame that this draft policy is a codification of what was presented to voters before the charter was adopted, and is trying to add further clarity and specificity. But if you look at the approved uses of the fund, reduction of stability and tax rate through existing debt is number one. The numbering is messed up. Two, capital expenses it corresponds with these items that are here. There's some additional clarity, but these are what are presented, and this is the minutes of the August 1st, 2023 meeting where this was also reviewed. So I will name this is not presented all in a cohesive memo, but I think the bottom line takeaway would be that I think the goal of this draft policy is to further codify and clarify the four categories that were in a draft policy by the select board. I was not chair at the time, I was a member, I made the motion, it was adopted by the select board. And I think our goal today is to clarify that. So that's my own 2 cents speaking as a member, not chair.
Can I ask you something, Alyssa? Did you realize at the time that you were going to be paying a 1% tax on propane? Because as a rental person, I pay the propane for my tenants, and now I'm paying 1% more, and so that's going to be passed on to them.
Yes, and my roommate just set up her propane account, so I will be paying that as well. So, thank you. Select board members, do we have questions, comments? We have an option that we could take a motion on this today. We could look for edits or comments. I know some points have been raised around clarity and asked to revisit this at a future meeting, or we could do some other thing. I see 2 hands in the back, but I'm going to go to select board first. Kane and then Roger.
I I think I want to beg the question, Sandy, you have pushed this, this agenda item for quite a while. Are you satisfied with? No?
There's a couple of changes I'd like to make.
You were one of the three hands. There was two in the back, and I went across. Did you have a hand, Troy?
I know we have like an understanding of how leftover funds are allocated, but I wouldn't mind that being added to this policy.
And Roger, did you have a hand up?
I think this is a good process. We posted this in order to get input. We're getting input, and so I think we should take whatever input we got and decide if this is perfect, we can pass it tonight. If not, we can rework it.
Great. And on that note, we had two hands. Who wants to start?
I'm just going to, Cheryl Bloor, for consistency from the documents that you just showed on the screen to what's on this proposal, those 4 bullets should be what's on this proposal. We shouldn't be changing the narrative and the language from that document to this document. So I would ask that whatever's in that charter is what those 4 bullets are that we're allowed to use the money for. The titling, economic development, capitalization, not affordable housing. Let's keep it consistent from what we have to what this proposal is going to be. Thanks.
Do you want to go on this?
I think I'll defer to Sandy.
I was putting a Valerie actually back behind you. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was looking at the aspirations, and number 1, the select board shall reasonably endeavor. Number 2, the select board shall endeavor. Why can't it be will? The select board will include significant expenses. The select board will be conservative in budgeting.
I think that's just like a fancy legally.
It seems like soft.
Well, it is aspirations.
I'd like will. I don't know. What about you? This is the community.
I agree with you.
Thank you.
I like things that say definitively.
Yeah, otherwise it's like,
Shall
well,
is
we
kind of nice,
tried,
but
we're
I like things that
sorry.
say we will do something.
Yes. And so is that acknowledged?
I mean, they legally mean the same thing, and I'm personally attached to shall since I use it every day, but I will defer to everybody else.
Well, you're
It's a little
lawyers,
thing,
so
I
that
know.
would be, that's slick.
Statutes are written.
Go ahead. Okay. Well, it's late.
We'll take it under consideration.
Do you have other things to read?
Yes.
Please.
For the third one, in the event there's a surplus, the fund shall not be spent unless approved by the select board at a duly warned meeting. Do you mean the public with the select board? Isn't that a vote?
It would be a vote by the select board as worded, but
But you're at a warned meeting. I mean, well, I would like that to be, I think, the select board with the public. It's our money. I'm just bringing it up. Can you write it down and bring it up again? Thank you.
Are you talking at a regular select board meeting or a town meeting?
Town meeting.
Okay, just making sure.
Isn't that where we talk about
Yeah,
anticipated
no, I
surplus?
understand. I just wanted to see where you were at.
That's where I'm at. Thank you. And so I do see, because I'm a firm believer in local option tax being used for capital expenses, paying down debt, and the tax rate to help taxpayers keep our taxes lower by addressing the tax rate. So I see those. The other thing I think is important is one-time projects that invest in our community, like something maybe for the pool or recreation. Those are important. But number 1 on the second page, funding for affordable housing. So I'm not saying I'm not for affordable housing, I'm for housing. But I just want to be clear that if someone comes and asks for money for housing, whether it's the Housing Task Force or a developer, that is publicly warned and voted on by the public in addition. Any money for housing, I think that the community should also participate in that vote. And I'm not sure if that's how that reads. It doesn't seem to. What I'm saying, simplest, to be simple, is I don't want somebody to walk in and say, I want $50,000 for housing, and the 5 people in the select board go, I agree.
Well, that's what we set up the Housing Trust Fund for.
Well, we're now looking at the local option tax policy.
Right,
So-
which is what it draws from the local option tax. The Housing Trust Fund draws from the local option tax.
So
And it was
if
agreed
anybody
upon
wants
that.
affordable
Right,
money,
and
is it a vote with the
the-
public?
The vote was at the public, right.
I'm asking, is that what it says here in this policy? Does it confirm that?
I think the draft as written doesn't say that, so thank you very much. We'll take that under advisement.
So what does that mean? We'll bring it up again another time, or I have to bring it up again another time?
I think personally, I'm hearing that this is not ready to be adopted tonight. I know there's like legal questions around spending authority and process. We have some suggestions around things that are in aspiration that might be moved. So personally, I would anticipate there'll be a subsequent updated draft of this for additional review.
Great.
And I'm just trying to manage, my job is to manage it.
That's fine. I mean,
hate
I brought
Robert's
this up in
rules.
June, and I brought it up in July, so I'm glad
Yeah.
it came up tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Sandy, did you want to speak? Sure.
This is great. I mean, you did a good job. I mean, I feel a little better. I do think that, as Cheryl said, it probably should be put in the same order just to make things clear. A couple questions I had. The first one says significant expenses, and I'm not sure that you're defining what is a significant expense. And that would be nice, whether it's $10,000 or whatever. The reason for my request to have this defined is I know that the select board has the authority to spend this money without, I mean, you have to announce it, but you have the right to do it. But if we make it so that the significant number is a number, say $10,000, unless it's an emergency request, I feel like that is enough that it shouldn't need a vote by the public. The other thing is, I'd like added, which I requested the first time, that any expenditure request funded by local option tax by an outside organization of our local government must be requested through appropriations and included on warnings for taxpayers to approve at town meeting. I think that's very important because otherwise the board might get into a little bit of problem with things like what Kathy was bringing up, and you all know I had an issue with giving money to an outside without giving it public opinion or the public to vote on it at town meeting. I felt that that was, but if we put it in here that anything, and the outside, just like all the allocations we have from the different organizations, I think that that's appropriate for anything outside of local government. So if that could be added, I would appreciate it, and I think everyone would agree with that. I think that the other thing to bring up, Kane's statement about the allocation to the trust fund. I do agree that the voters did vote to allocate that, but the voters did not create a trust fund. That was never voted on. To create a trust fund, separate funds from the general fund or the local options tax has not been created by the voters. Your reference before was Montpelier's housing, that got voted on by the people, not by the select board. So,
Right, and that draws from their general fund, it draws.
but it's not a separate, it's a separate fund agreed to by the voters, and that needs to be brought up. If you guys want to keep that money in there, then you need to bring it before the voters, because I don't agree with it being unreserved funds. You've created a reserve, and you know that's what it is. So it should be brought up to the voters, and I'm sure they'll agree, and you should agree that, I mean, you must think that they're going to agree, otherwise you wouldn't have done it in the first place. So there shouldn't be a problem with saying to the voters, we've created this account, are you okay with it? And then you can fund it every year if you want, but it definitely needs to be approved by the voters. So those are the only things that I had problems with. Otherwise, I think it was very well written.
Thanks, Sandy. So it's 9 o'clock. We're over for this agenda item. In terms of next steps, I want to flag select board members. I see a hand, one moment. Is there others? We've heard some comments here from the public. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve this as it's currently drafted, or do we think we've covered all the things we'd like to have in a subsequent draft for review?
I think we need a subsequent draft.
Great.
I would agree with Mike.
Okay, so I'm hearing subsequent draft. Do we have one final comment on this, and then we're going to move on?
Again, a question, clarifying question, because what Sandy said, I want to make sure I understand it too. This to me is a windfall, right, for the town. I get it, heard that said before. You don't patch your roof when the sun's out, right? So it's good to have a reserve. Is it that you cannot have a reserve? In other words, if you have local option tax this year that goes unspent, can you put that funding in a rainy day fund, just like, I don't know, the governor's talked about it before, there's a rainy day fund at the state, right? And then you have to draw down that. When you have things like the first person who spoke, some sort of event in which you have to apply some resources that were not, I mean, Mother Nature doesn't give you a budget timeline, right? So can you put unallocated funds in the reserve and in the policy commit to, in the fourth quarter of a fiscal year, we shall have 25% of local option tax or whatever still unobligated? Or you look at it from a seasonal perspective to say, we know when the floods happen, kinda, except for December, right? That was kind of weird. But if you could look at that timeline for allocation of funds, do you need to be 100% spent every year? Or can you look at it from a, we know something might be coming, maybe we should allocate an MR of sorts?
The answer is there's many different ways to do it. Some of it just boils down to preference.
Okay. Because I think it's worth looking at, right? Just don't overspend something on new bills because other bills kind of bite you in the butt, right? So, okay, I'll shut up. Thanks.
Mike, go ahead.
Just in response to what Tom just said, I think Bill Sheplick said this before, we have in our tax stabilization fund the ability to do that. So again, I don't know if we need to necessarily do that within the local option tax, purview. I think that's, and I don't want to get too simplistic, like four bullet categories. I think this is a much better guidance document for both the public as well as the select board.
Tom, do you feel you have sufficient guidance for doing an updated draft based on this? Okay. Is there any other action from select board on this tonight? All right, seeing none, I'm going to move us to our next item, which is errors and omissions. We have a letter from the assessor, and Tom, if you would mind running through this.
Sure, this is actually from the assessor, but it's at the request of the board of listers that reviewed the item. Errors and omissions happen every so often. The lister makes a valuation estimate on the property as of April 1st each year for the grand list, and sometimes there's properties that are in progress, and they error in the evaluation that was done. And so in this case, they made an assumption about the water and septic being in place as of April 1st, and they were not. And so there's a request to adopt the correction, which has a very minor impact on taxes.
Any other questions or context for the board, or would you just be looking for a motion to approve?
I think just be looking for a motion. This is, I don't want to say it's a matter of routine. It doesn't necessarily happen every year, but it's a matter of routine.
Any questions or comments from the board? Roger?
I move that we approve the request for the errors and omissions that have been presented.
Second.
Ty, who wants it? All right, so motion by Roger, second by Mike. Any further discussion?
I need to recuse myself from this.
Okay, Tori's going to recuse herself. Any other questions or cons? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Tori is abstaining. Motion passes. Does someone want to have a physical copy for the eyes to sign? Okay, Roger's going to go ahead and sign that with our approval based on that motion. That brings us to our next agenda item, which is grant updates. Tom, I will turn it over to you.
Sure, we've talked about a lot of this already as part of the Stanley Watson, but just want to give quick update on a couple of the grants and the timelines as we know it. So we do hope to hear back on the FEMA grant that we applied for Randall Meadow. We applied for $4 million for that grant. Again, competitive funding, even if it's awarded, there's a long road ahead. We actually, at the end of September, we applied for a different source of funding. It's called Community Development Block Grant Funding. It's actually HUD money, not FEMA money. We also applied for Randall Meadow for exactly the same purpose. We actually increased the grant amount to $4,250,000, almost to the penny, just based on some updated estimating and perhaps the assumption that we'd be 1 year later in doing the project than we were thinking with the FEMA grant. So we have 2 grants out there that we hope to hear something about them by the end of the year, and they would, if funded fully, pay for the Randall Meadow project entirely. We are also working on a couple other things. One is what's called clean water funding, which is state grant funding, and we're starting a grant application to move that forward. That's in concert with Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. It'd be a lesser pot of money. I've heard a couple different numbers, so don't quote me, but it's in the range of $500,000 to $750,000, and that would also be Randall Meadow money to. If it's on its own, that's a start. If it's not on its own, it might be able to augment some other grants. We are also working on applying for funds to remove the dams, or what's left of the dams, on Thatcher Brook and Waterbury Center. Perhaps some localized flood protection we would get from that relief. And then, as something Dana mentioned earlier when he was sitting there, there's 5 separate it's a pot of funding we're going to go after that gives us some access to study 5 separate projects, all with flood mitigation potential. And so the idea would be that you bring those projects to what they call the 30% engineering phase. 30% engineering phase, which basically means that you're bid ready at that point. So in addition to Randall Meadow, we've got several other irons in the fire, so to speak. A big part of Dana's job is to just keep eyes and ears and everything, and to make sure that we're not missing opportunities, because a huge part of it is just having the time to be out there in the grant world and know what's available. So that's my quick 5-minute update. Again, really hopeful about Randall Meadow getting a slug of cash from one of these funding sources, and hope to know something by the end of the year. And ideally, and I'm not sure this will work, but I think ideally if we know something significant that we feel firm about, then perhaps Randall Meadow can be part of the budget conversation. If there's a need to work towards a town meeting date bond vote, I don't want to commit anyone to that, but that's obviously where my mind goes. If we're seeking funding for a big project like this, and if we get partial funding, it's beyond the ability to fund this directly through budget appropriations. So we may be headed in that direction. I don't know that town meeting day is the right timing, but if there's not full funding for this project and there's a desire to move forward, that's, I think, the appropriate next step.
Thanks, Tom. Questions from the board?
I just want to, I guess this is me speaking for myself, is that my outlook for federal grants moving forward for anyone is pretty bleak. So I'll be pleasantly surprised if anyone received a grant anywhere. But if we do, that's great. But Tom's absolutely right. When it comes to Randall Meadow, if we don't receive grants, we still have to move forward on that project one way or another. So I think voters on any town meeting day in the next few years might need to start considering that we're going to need to fund that project ourselves should federal grants dry up.
Other questions or comments from the board? All right. Seeing none, I think we're on to our next agenda item, which is executive session for both personnel and collective bargaining. So we'll need motions for that.
I move to find the premature public knowledge of personnel management and collective bargaining agreements would place the town of Waterbury at substantial disadvantage.
Second.
Motion by Kane, second by Tori. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? And then we need a motion to enter executive
I
session.
move to enter executive session and invite the municipal manager.
Oh, really?
Second.
Motion by Kane, second by Tori. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any abstentions? All right, we'll go into executive session at 9:11
Recording
p.m.
stopped.